Welcome back to the Play by Play Podcast YouTube channel, where today we are going to be taking a look at probably one of the most anticipated rematches in a very, very long time, and the most anticipated rematch and possibly a most anticipated fight of the year this year, and that is Chris Eubank Jr. versus Connor Benn. Both of these guys fought earlier in the year. Eubank ended up winning by unanimous decision. It was a clean slate. All three judges having to win 116 to 112. But there is so much more to this rematch than even in the first fight. These two guys now know each other. And while last fight might possibly have been fighting for their father's legacy, as their fathers, both Nigel Benn and Chris Eubank Sr., fought twice back in like the 80s and 90s, I believe. This fight right here is really to build their own legacies for themselves, and that is why I think it is even more important. But really quick, before we get into the analysis of this rematch, I want to encourage you guys to go down below, subscribe to the channel, leave a like on the video, as well as comment and share with your friends. And if you haven't already, go ahead and follow us on all social medias, that being TikTok, Instagram, and Twitter. All of those ads are going to be down below. We're on all of those social medias. You'll get to see my latest reaction to breaking news within the NBA, the NFL, and combat sports. And you will never miss for whenever the podcast decides to upload an episode. And without further ado, guys, let's look into Eubank Benn 2. So where do we start with this rematch? Well, first of all, can we just say that we are being absolutely blessed this winter towards the end of the year by boxing, by Riyadh season. Not only do we have this rematch, but then in a week's time, we have a mega card, a Riyadh season for a mega card, highlighted by the two co-main events, David Benavidez versus Anthony Yarde, Devin Haney going against Brian Norman Jr. for a welterweight title. There are going to be so many great fights on that card. It's going to be an amazing night, so make sure that you go ahead and tune into it. That is possibly a card that I think could show to be the fight card of the year. 1,000%. I think that there are going to be a lot of surprises and a lot of new names made that night in Riyadh. But before we get to that, we have this fight right here, Chris Eubank versus Connor Benn 2. A very interesting rematch. And I say that because I don't think that you would ever believe that a fight between somebody who is a natural super middleweight, which is at 168, and somebody who is a natural welterweight at 147 would even remotely be competitive, realistic, even at a catch weight of 161 pounds. But it is. And it not only had, an amazing storyline behind it with the two fathers previously fighting, but it also had an amazing fight. That first fight was an absolute war between these two. It was very close down to the end. Connor Benn hit Chris Eubank with some bombs, some big-time bombs. And Eubank, I think that this was a defining performance for his career, a career that a lot of people have defined as being lackluster, as something that has come up short, especially in comparison to his father and what his father had during his career. He's had, multiple losses. He's kind of skimped out on fighting some of the bigger names and some of the tougher opponents that he could have taken. This was a fight that he finally showed some heart, some grit. He showed that he could fight through something, but albeit to a smaller guy, which is one of the interesting points that I really want to bring about this, is that there was so much talk leading up to the first fight, and now even to this fight, about Eubank being at a big-time disadvantage, having to weight drain himself all the way down to 161 pounds, and not being as physically fit as he needed to be because of the weight cut. But may I remind you that Connor Benn is coming up 2-3 weight classes. He's coming up 14 total pounds. He is a natural 147 guy, and he's making his way all the way up to 161. There is a massive size advantage there. Dare I say, a good 3, 4, potentially even 5 inches between these two guys. And we have to give him credit, despite a lot of the handicaps that he had going into there with the size difference. He put up a war against Eubank. He made his skills felt. And to me, it wasn't even the best Connor Benn that we've ever seen. He was somebody who was very overcome by the moment, came out swinging immediately, did not take a technical approach to it at all. And so later down the line in the fight, there were times where he was tired, where he was wailing, where he was missing some easy shots, where he wasn't be able to finish through, especially in moments where he had Eubank hurt. He was definitely out of his element in a massive event like that. And that definitely hurt him. And I think that that's something that is definitely going to be very interesting this time around. Now that Ben is used to that type of stage, will he not be consumed by it this time? Will he be able to focus in and put together a much more detailed game plan? Because he's talking about that here during the press tour that they've had about it being a much more concise and delivered game plan. And I'm hoping so, because he's definitely going to need that, because Eubank is a technical master. We all know that. He is a pretty boy. He is a guy that does not like to get hit. And while he did get hit a lot in that fight, he did put a lot of his boxing skills on display, especially that thick, lightning quick jab, which he was pretty much landing at will on Ben, especially towards the middle part and even the end of that fight. But no, let's not talk a little bit more and commentate around the fight. Let's actually take a look at this fight and how it went, because I went back, I watched it, and I encourage you, if you haven't seen it before, or even if you had seen it before, to go back and rewatch this. It is a hell of a fight. And so I went back and rescored it and really looked at this. And, oh, man, it was just a really great fight. But one of the things before we quickly get into the rounds was just the aura of both of them coming into this. Connor Benn, with his entrance, he was really acting as his name really proposes, the Destroyer. I mean, he really walked in as like this destroyer of worlds, this full black robe, his black hood on, and he just had this tiger in his eyes, like he was ready to bite your head off. Meanwhile, Eubank, again, very similar to his character, very much pretty boy. The reaction that he got with him and his father walking out of the limousine or the taxi that they got out of, with Nigel Benn and Connor Benn watching them, and the crowd's reaction to that, because there weren't a lot of people that believed that Eubank Sr. was going to be there to support their son. That was amazing. And then coming out to his dad's normal walkout song and whatnot, it was just, oh my gosh, it brought so much nostalgia. It created an amazing scene. And, Eubank definitely acted as the more experienced and veteran fighter walking down to the ring. He took his time. He didn't allow himself to be rushed. He knew that making Ben wait longer and longer was an advantage for him, marinating the moment and really just making Ben, clinch up and really feed and soak into those emotions was going to be more of a benefit to him. And that's how it started off in the beginning of the fight. And immediately as we begin to jump in, I gave round one immediately 10-9 to Eubank. The original look at it, Eubank just looked massive in there. He looked like a titan with the massive size advantage that he had. Now, Ben did come out strong in the beginning. He was applying pressure immediately, trying to press the action. He was actually showing some good head movement, but there just wasn't, once again, a lot of technicality with these shots. He was really just swinging around, trying to land a thudding blow. And Eubank was easily able to evade, hitting Ben with the thudding jab pretty much at will in that round. There was a good right hand by Ben halfway through the round, but overall, I feel like Eubank really controlled the round. And even at moments, he didn't allow himself to be bullied and back up by the guy who was pressing the action. And I really like that. So I scored a 10-9 Eubank. And then as you transition into round two, I scored a 10-9 Ben in round two, which means overall we have a tied score of 19-19. I thought that this was a really good bounce back round for Ben overall. I think that he used much more feints to drop Eubank's guard. I thought that the head movement was great, and that is, the central theme of this fight. When Connor Ben really, relaxes and really sits down on his feet and is able to, throw feints and fight as a more technical fighter, he can actually compete really well on a level that Eubank is supposed to have a massive advantage in. Eubank was not able to really get much done in this round and even got stunned early on with a massive right hand, which happens a couple of times throughout this fight and happened, within these first two rounds. Ben, had a solid jab. But again, you just see while he was, getting to a state of relaxation, he needs to relax a little bit more. He can't be as clinched. He needs to relax his shoulders and just feed into boxing a little bit more. But I thought that round two was really solid for him. I scored at 10-9 for him. Then round three, I also scored this round for Connor Benn. So right now he is up 29-28. I thought that Ben looked really explosive in this round. I thought that his feints were really keeping Eubanks guessing. And one of the things that the feints were also doing was keeping Eubanks' hands at home. So Eubank wasn't able to go out and flash that jab and really control the center of the ring. Ben with his feints, he really was able to create stuff, but he was also able to kind of nullify Eubanks' offense. And once again, stunned him with a nice left hook early on in the round. And the weight cut, especially in this round, it looked like it was affecting Eubank and his ability to really take shots at certain points and even, stay alive in the round. I really like how Ben came out in this round. I gave it to him. Then in round four, I thought the Eubank came and bounced back. So I have it 10-9 Eubank. It's a tie 38-38. I thought that Eubank was exuberating confidence in the round. I think that this was one of his strongest rounds of the fight. He was talking to Benn throughout it, as he was throughout the rest of the fight. He was much more active. He was actually pressing the action on the front foot, putting together some really, really solid combinations. While Benn, he turned a little bit more into a counterpuncher in this round. It was much the opposite of round 3, where he was much keeping his hands at home, waiting to see what Eubank was doing. And when he's doing that, when he's on the back foot, he's really just not as effective. And especially being the smaller man, it's just not the strategy that he needs to go with. It was a really, really close round, but overall, I thought that Eubank, with his pressing of the action, with his combos, ended up, stealing this one. Then rounds 5 and 6, I both gave to Eubank. So ultimately, it's going to be 58-56 to Eubank going into round 7. I thought that round 5 was a very, very tight round. I didn't feel like anyone overall really took it, but I did enjoy Eubank's counters more than Benn's aggression. I didn't feel like Benn was really getting a lot off. And again, at this moment, he's still really wailing at times. He's using head movement when Eubank isn't even really necessarily throwing. It's a lot of wasted movements that's really draining his energy going into the rounds. And then in round 6, I think that Eubank once again looked slick in this round. He was using the much better head movement. He wasn't really allowing Benn to really land and really give big-time damage. Benn, again, pressing the action and being the forward aggressor, but not really getting a lot of offense out of that. So round 5 and round 6, 10-9 Eubank, 58-56 Eubank going into round 7. Whereas just as I had given Eubank 2 rounds in a row in rounds 5 and 6, 7 and 8, I went back to Connor Benn. So it's once again a tie going into round 9. I felt that in round 7, Eubank's motions, he started to look, a little bit more sloppy and exhausted. He was kind of, trailing his feet a little bit more. He wasn't picking himself up as much as he needed to. And Benn, while he didn't land anything really consistently, because there wasn't a lot of offense to this round, I think that the aggression was why I was more tilted towards Benn taking this. He turned it into much more of a dogfight, clinching around, pushing Eubank back, using his smaller leverage. And then in round 8, this was a very, very hard round to score. But again, I thought that Benn overall had the more impactful blows. Eubank's jab was definitely the demanding punch within the round, but Benn was putting together a lot more combinations. And when you're throwing combos as to opposed to single shots, sometimes that can stick out a little bit more, which is why I went and named this to Benn. So once again, 2 rounds in a row, rounds 7 and 8, 10-9 going to Benn. So I have it 76-76, a tie as of right now, going into round 9. Round 9, I gave this one to Chris Eubank. So it was 86-85 with Chris Eubank. Another round with just incredible back and forth action. This is where it really started to unfold into a war. Eubank ends up getting cut, I believe, either in this round or a little bit early on. However, he did a great job once again getting on the front foot and really using his size to bully Benn and put him up against the ropes, which is where Benn, with his shorter arms, especially when Eubank is able to pin him in the clinch, Benn can't really get anything off, and that's where he's having difficulty putting together offense. Benn had also some trouble setting his feet to throw. When you're pressing the action as you are with Eubank and you're throwing feints and whatnot, Benn is consistently having to, rechange the angle, try to find spots where he can be in the advantage and pushing you back. And so he wasn't able to really set his feet to really throw anything meaningful. That being said, a little bit later in the round, he still hits Eubank with a pretty solid left hook. But overall, Eubank controlled the round. I have him winning 86-85 going into round 10, where again, I gave it to Connor Benn. It's just a seesaw fest, back and forth, back and forth. I thought that Benn's headshots worked well, but I think that he set them up really well due to his body work. If you go over and rewatch round 10, this was probably the most prominent body work of the fight. I mean, Benn was taking a very, very conscious effort to the body, and I think that that's something that he should apply to the entire fight within the rematch, is targeting the body, especially when you have a much taller guy than you, and he's, up here protecting the head with so many of the headshots that you applied to him. Chop down that freaking body, and especially a guy who is weight trained, make him even more tired going into the later rounds. Begin to drop that guard, and then you can begin to put in the real damage. And he's just going to be so tired that the head movement isn't going to be as effective, and you're going to start landing at will. So I thought that Benn's body work was amazing. He was able to sneak in shots by just fading down and going high up to the head, going high and fading down. And if him and Eubank were the same height, I think that this would have been a round where he would have knocked out Chris Eubank Jr. I thought that there was great action. I thought that Connor just landed a lot of big-time flush shots. So it is 95-95 heading into a round 11 and 12. And both of these rounds I gave to Eubank, which seals the deal for Eubank. 7 rounds to 5, 115, 113. I thought that in round 11, Ben started off strong, but midway through, the table started to turn. I thought that Eubank was able to turn the tide a little bit. He put Ben on the ropes a little bit more and was able to just sneak in some very sneaky combos that were very eye-catching. And then finally in round 12, I thought that once again, this was probably one of the two strongest rounds for Eubank. I think that he completely controlled this round. He was pushing Ben back. Ben exhausted at this point. He had been wailing and coming forward for so many rounds that it was really, really difficult for him to keep going. And it might have cost him in the end with all of that, emotion that he ended up putting into it, because round 12, he really didn't have nothing left. And Chris put it all on the line there. I have to give him credit for that. Pushed Ben to the ropes, kept him there, nullified his offense, and then just did enough to able to edge the round for him. So overall, again, it's 7-5 in my opinion. 115-113 Chris Eubank Jr., which I actually don't think is that bad of a score considering that all three judges had it 116-112 Chris Eubank Jr. So I definitely think that there is some moderation there. But again, what a fight. Two things that I think both fighters can build on. I think that Chris needs to press the action more. I think that he needs to push Ben back a lot more. Use your jab, use that thudding jab, but use it to back him up. Double up on the jab, back him up into the ropes and clinch him and just use that size advantage. Don't allow him to come forward, because that is really his game. When he's able to set his feet, use his quick feet, use that head movement, and then come down and over with the thudding blow, that's when he is most effective. But when you put him on the ropes, especially with how much smaller he is than you, with how much of an advantage of a reach you have, he could even do something where he just puts Ben against the ropes and he's just jabbing right here and keeping him in his face. That would be a really, really great strategy. And it would also keep him with having more energy throughout the fight. And then for Ben, I think the keys for him really is this. Once again, don't go all out in the beginning rounds. Like, conserve your energy a little bit. Be a little bit more relaxed, calm, and collected, and have a more, structured game plan. Use that body work a lot more as you were doing. Use your head movement, really set those feet, and use your feints so that you're keeping Eubank's hands here. And if you put a conscious effort into that body work, later down the line when this guy is really, really weight trained, that's going to weigh on him. And those hands are going to be able to drop, and then you're going to be able to land those thudding blows within the last 4 to 5 rounds, which could potentially knock him out. I think that one thing that we proved in this fight is Ben, despite being the smaller guy, he has what it takes to knock Chris out. He just didn't have enough to really go in there and finish the work that he really started. And so I think if he puts in the early work in the beginning, in the first couple of rounds, going to the body, that's going to end up paying off for him. And then in the later rounds, he'll be able to take advantage of it and do some serious, serious damage to Eubank to the head. But overall, who takes this fight? Me personally, I'm hoping that Connor Benn, I hope Connor Benn takes it so we can have a trilogy matchup. But I think that Chris Eubank is going to take this one again. While Ben seems to be a little bit more calmer, you can still see that aggression and that fire. And maybe that's just who Ben is. And we've seen that, throughout his earlier career and his ability to knock people out at will in those early rounds. Maybe that's just who Connor Benn really is, with the fire and the aggression that he has. But it just seems so similar to the first fight. And Chris, as much as he's been, ducking and diving things, as much as he's been trying to act like a little bit of a diva, blaming the weight cut and whatnot, the cool, calm, and collectiveness, the experience that he's had all throughout the years, the fact that he's beating Connor Benn, that he's taking his best shots, that he was able to push him back and whatnot, that he's the bigger guy. I just think that there is so much in Chris Eubank Jr.'s corner that it would be mind-blowing to him if he doesn't end up taking this fight. I still think that it will be close, don't get me wrong, and I don't think that Chris, in my opinion, has the capabilities to knock Ben out. But I think that he, once again, could control this to being a 8-4, 7-5 victory for him within a unanimous decision, as long as he sticks behind that jab and pushes Ben back. This, that could be definitely an easy path to victory for him. So overall, I'm going to edge it for Chris Eubank. But, if this fight ends earlier, I wouldn't be surprised if Connor Benn is able to get to his head early on and knock him out. But let me know what you guys think about that all down below. What do you think about this rematch? What do you think about these upcoming cards from Turki Al Sheikh and Riyadh season? Man, we are being blessed as combat sports fans. Let me know all of your predictions about this fight down below. as well as how you scored the first fight, which would be really, really interesting to know, as well as commenting on this video. Make sure to also like it, share it with your friends, and subscribe to the channel. And as always, I'm always going to encourage you guys to go down below and to follow us on all social medias, that being TikTok, Instagram, and Twitter. All of those ads are going to be down below. We're on all of those social medias. You'll get to see my latest reaction to breaking news in the NBA, the NFL, and combat sports. And you will never miss for whenever the podcast decides to upload an episode. And without further ado, guys, that's all that I have for you guys today. I will see you guys on the next one. Take it easy and peace.